If I could move forward to our next question, and Jahangir Saab, sort of changing the tempo somewhat from going, it's more a practical question, and it comes from Mrs. Ahmed from the United States, and it's a question about halal food. Jazakallah, Mrs. Ahmed, for your question. She writes, extends assalamu alaikum to the panel. I have a question about halal food. I want to know, what's the guidance for buying meat, chicken? I live in the USA. Can we buy it from an ordinary shop when halal food shops are present and when it's not present in both cases? Similarly, in cases of frozen foods which have such contents, and by that I'm sure she means meat contents of some kind. Also, if we are invited by some non-Muslims or Muslims when we know this food is not from the halal meat shop, what should one do? What's the guiding principle?
So actually there are several questions.
Indeed, yeah,
within this question.
Within that.
The guiding principle which has been given in the Holy Quran is that the food of the people of the book is halal or permissible for Muslims. But that primarily regards the Jewish people, people of the Jewish, so kosher food, which would be the way that the Jewish people slaughter their animals, that is absolutely halal and good for us. But also we know that the Ahlul Kitab include the Christians too.
Indeed.
And so in that case, the guiding principle would be for the person to actually determine whether the animal had been slaughtered in a fashion which, of course, if they're not Muslims, they won't be saying Bismillahi Allahu Akbar. In the name of Allah, Allah is the greatest. They won't be saying that when they slaughter the animal, but at least they will be removing all the blood from the body of the animal. And if that has happened and it can be certified that the animal has been slaughtered in this way, then that food is also permissible, let's say as a second best to having kosher food. But it's absolutely fine for a Muslim to use that food as long as it's been slaughtered properly. Then before using it, the Muslim should say Bismillahi Allahu Akbar, and then the food becomes halal for him or her. So the person should really apply that principle when buying food. But of course, if the person can even go a little further than usual to get food from buy meat from a halal shop, then they should try to do that. That's the best and safest option. Usually in the West, as it has been observed these days, the meat is kept separate. You will find separate slaughterhouses for chickens, separate slaughterhouses for cows, separate for sheep, and also, of course, for pigs, for swine. And usually all the animals are slaughtered in the way that all the blood is let out of their bodies. This is the usual practice these days. So the person should use the common sense and apply these principles when trying to buy food of this type.
And I think the simple answer, Mrs. Ahmed, if there's a choice between a halal meat shop and a non-halal meat shop, it's self-evident you go for the halal option. What about on this issue, though, about being invited to someone's house? You know, you're invited as a guest. You're not sure about where the meat has originated from, and some people are sensitive. Do they really want to ask the host, is your meat halal, is it kosher? Well, one would expect that the host may be partial to that already.
Well, there was one instance which we were discussing a little bit before the program. I think Dr. Saab remembers the incident, so it would be better if he could talk about it.
There is an incident in the life of the Holy Prophet ﷺ when some of the companions were away from the Holy Prophet ﷺ, and it was to a chief of a tribe who was quite ill, and his headache would not get better. And the companions obviously prayed for him, and he recovered. And as a token of his gesture of what they had done, they presented the companions with some meat. And you have to remember this was a non-Muslim tribe that they had gone to. So when they returned to the Holy Prophet ﷺ, they recounted the incident to him and asked him that they had been presented with this meat and they had partaken of it. And with some skepticism they asked him this question, but the Holy Prophet ﷺ said, where is the meat? And some was presented to him, and he pronounced the name of Allah on the meat and partook of that meat. So this gives us an indication that the Holy Prophet ﷺ also made this permissible for us, that having pronounced the name of Allah on the meat, he was able to partake of it. and that is something that we can do if we are invited to a meal where this is the case.
Indeed, I mean, every child is taught from a very early age to invoke the name of Allah before you have any meal or eat or drink anything, and I think, yes, Abdul Saad.
Just a small point to remind the viewers. There is a golden principle laid down by Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in these situations, and that is da ma yuribuka ila ma la yuribuka. Always adopt that which is absolutely certain to you, and leave aside all others which is doubtful. So that is a golden principle one can definitely adopt in the West.
Jazakallah. I think, Mrs. Ahmed, I think between these three gentlemen you've got a practical answer, a religious answer, a philosophical answer, and I think a guiding principle, the golden rule, let it be that when in doubt, leave it well alone. I think that's the general message to be taken from there.